Hello and welcome to the Friday, November 19th, 2021 pre-Thanksgiving edition of On Iowa Politics. This week, Reynolds popular but has sand in her gears, and Miller-Meeks has financial disclosure problems. Hi, I'm James Lynch of the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and with me today are Tom Barton of the Quad City Times. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, James.
Erin Murphy, Statehouse Bureau Chief for Lee Newspapers. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning.
And Gazette Opinion Editor Todd Dorman. Good morning, Todd.
Good morning.
You can find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to On Iowa Politics wherever you find your podcast. First up today, Reynolds remains popular with voters. Another poll, another shot of good news for Governor Kim Reynolds, who, rumor has it, is gearing up to run for re-election. The Des Moines Register's Iowa poll found that 51% of Iowa voters approve of her performance in office, citing her handling of COVID-19, the economy, and schools and education. That is down from 53% in September, so either she's becoming less popular with voters or the ivermectin treatments aren't working for her supporters. The poll, which has a 3.4% margin of error, found 43% of Iowans disapprove of the job she's doing, a number that has held pretty steady in recent polls. Todd, is this, and the poll's finding that 49% of Iowans think the state is on the right track, good news for the governor who was underwater with voters as recently as March?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's you always want to be above 50 someplace before you run for re-election. Right track, wrong track. It lags behind her a little bit, which is kind of interesting. But sure. I mean, she's in a strong position as we assume, will seek re-election, and these polls confirm that she's got, very heavy support among Republicans, decent support among independents, and almost no support among Democrats. So I guess that's that's the world we live in.
Erin, when you look at that dip in the governor's approval rating from 53 to 51%, and the fact that the poll has a 3.4% margin of error, should Democrats take heart here? The poll found that most voters haven't formed an opinion about Deidre DeGier and Ross Smith, the declared Democratic candidates. So is there room for optimism?
ever so slightly. I mean, I guess it's better to go that way than in the other direction. If you're Democrats, at least they didn't go up 2 percentage points, but that's obviously not a lot of movement and not enough where, all of a sudden Republicans would start having, panic attacks to any degree. So the needle has to move a little more there. And as you noted, the candidates that are in the race as of now need to get out there and get their message to more people, and that'll come. I mean, we have time for that. We're almost a year away still from this thing. So, but no, it's not a ground shifting move in the polls by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, we're talking about it, but I don't know that most Iowans are really paying much attention to the 2022 governor's race, and especially a primary race, which is 7 months away. And I think we've all heard from some Democrats who aren't excited or confident in those current candidates. State Auditor Rob Sand is frequently mentioned as a potential challenger to Reynolds. Although the assumption was that when he was elected in 2018 that the auditor's office was a stepping stone to higher office. Sand hasn't made a move, at least so far. Asking him about that this week, and he just said, it's a hard choice. So
wait till he's governor.
Yeah, there'll be lots of those. Erin, whether he runs or not, Sand continues to be a thorn in Reynolds' side. He released an audit accusing the governor of misusing $450,000 in federal funds, coronavirus relief funds, to pay salaries for staff members for 3 months last year, and concealing it by passing it through the Department of Homeland Security. He said it's not clear why she had to use the federal funds to pay those salaries. But when you look at, Iowa spent $12 billion in federal funds last year, including about $3 billion in COVID relief funds. Is $450,000 a big deal? Should it be a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like you said, when you're talking about such big numbers, it's easy to get, cynical about something that, relatively speaking, is as small as $400,000. Now that's still $400,000. That's a lot of money, and we shouldn't forget that. And every dime of state money, of taxpayer money, should be used, and federal money for that matter, should be used properly. The governor's office maintains that it was proper use and that they had clearance from the federal Treasury Department. They claim they're getting proof of that. Doing my job, I've asked for proof of that too, and I'm still waiting on that. But to your point, kind of politically speaking, looking at this thing, it is kind of interesting. This isn't the first audit of this kind. He's issued reports on Medicaid, on the Workday contract. Safe to say, the kind of reports that the previous auditor, who was a Republican, did not do, and probably would not have done as well. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I think just based on history, that's a safe assumption. So the sand in the gears there is a funny but apt description of how this auditor has been for this governor. And you can be cynical and say, well, the only reason he's doing that is because he's thinking about running for governor and he's trying to put some dents in the armor before he gets there, using the official office to do that. Someone else might say, well, hey, this is what an auditor is supposed to do, is look into state operations and state finances and find these things that are being done incorrectly. So it is kind of an interesting situation.
I think the news to me was that there were 21 staffers in the governor's office. I didn't realize there were that many people working in there. But Todd, do you think this is going to matter to anybody other than the Democratic nominee?
Well, I think, it's not in and of itself, but as part of a larger picture. I mean, we had the situation where she misspent the $21 million on a computer system, the HR computer system. And she seems to be, sometimes more interested in sort of patching holes in the budget with this money than helping people who are struggling through the pandemic. So, she turned down $95 million for school surveillance testing, which it's turned out through the Delta variant that might have come in handy. Because a lot of parents and folks are kind of left in the dark as to what the actual situation is in their schools. We get emails that say, 6 positive cases, but that's probably not all, and who knows. So we're more information would have been nice. So that money probably could have been well spent. I think probably the bigger problem with this is that we have this stuff crop up repeatedly, that there's questions about how she's running the state, and the legislature has absolute zero interest in even like having a hearing to bring anybody in to ask questions about this stuff. It's like there's no oversight at all. There's virtually no penalty for doing any of this stuff. So I mean, Rob Sand is ambitious, and he is this is about politics to some extent, but he's also the only person in state government that's actually calling her out on this stuff. So it's in that way, it's a public service, I guess, that people otherwise we wouldn't. Who knows? If we had a Republican auditor, we might not know about any of this. Although I guess it was Laura Bellin who broke this back in August and went through the public records and found the discrepancy where the spreadsheet was labeled one way and then labeled another way a little while later. So, it fits into that maybe a larger theme that, the governor's office isn't a careful steward of this federal money, and that Democrats will probably hammer on maybe on that theme.
It almost seems swampy.
The rules don't apply to us is kind of the it seems like that's the problem. Mm-hmm. Because we control all the levers of power, so we can do whatever we want. Yeah. And that's, I mean, Republicans may not care about that, but I mean, there's probably some independent voters that are like, yeah, that's not how it's supposed to work.
Tom, the poll also found that the governor with an 88% approval rating among Republicans, which made her more popular than Senator Chuck Grassley and Senator Joni Ernst, who got approval ratings of 80% and 71% respectively. They're all Republicans. They all supported former President Donald Trump and received his support. And for the most part, they're all on the same page when it comes to the pandemic and the economy. So why are their ratings lower than the governor's?
Yeah, so according to one poll respondent interviewed by the Des Moines Register, she said that she likes Reynolds in the legislature for many of the same reasons, but disapproves of Grassley's vote in support of a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package. And regarding Ernst, said that she doesn't believe the second-term senator has accomplished much, and that she is, quote, whatever she needs to be to get the votes, end quote. So I think that when it comes to Ernst and Grassley, it's a reaction that I think reflects a lot of Iowans and voters' concerns about just kind of the fractured nature of Congress and the partisan gridlock that we see there. There's more wrangling over issues that while it might not have broad support among Republicans, seems to have broad support among the rest of the nation, like with the infrastructure bill. Whereas compared to Iowa, like Todd said a bit earlier, Republicans run the table with their trifecta, right? They control the governor's office. They've got majorities in both the House and Senate. And so it makes it a lot easier for them to promote and pass their agenda. And so I think that that's kind of what you're seeing in the polling there, is that, Republicans maybe are not as happy with members of Congress just because it's harder to get things done there. And you've got to be... what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think. It's too early today and I haven't had my coffee.
I feel your pain. A Quinnipiac poll found that while 62% of voters supported the bipartisan infrastructure package, only 38% of Republicans liked it. And that might explain why Grassley's approval rating is lower than Reynolds. It probably also explains why he went out of his way this week on a call with Iowa reporters to defend his vote for the $1 trillion bipartisan package. And maybe he needs to, because according to Axios, Senator Rick Scott, who heads the Republican Senate campaign committee, told his colleagues that top party donors are furious with the Republicans who voted for the infrastructure package. And not only are these folks being skewered by former President Donald Trump, but Scott said donors complained that it was foolish for any member of the party to help deliver a win for President Biden. And Grassley sort of unprompted went through the whole reasoning behind voting for that package this week and listed off every group, almost down to every Iowan who wanted him to support it. And it was sort of like, gee, Senator, nobody is questioning your vote for that, but thanks for the background. So maybe he feels a need to, explain his support and convince Republicans that it was the right move.
And that's just to add on to that, James, real quick. It's such an interesting thing because you said, what was it, 38%, only 38% of Republicans liked it, which is a small number when you're thinking about support from within your own party, right? But if you think about it through a different viewpoint of what's the last thing that an all Democratic, cohort put together and passed that 38% of Republicans approved of. I mean, from that standpoint, it's a gigantic number.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. And I have to kind of question I don't know, the polling could be right. I mean, that might be what people are telling the pollsters. But at the same time, Grassley makes a pretty strong argument that, everybody, all the farm commodity groups, all the chambers of commerce, all the, League of Cities, counties, all these groups are supporting it. And then you have all sorts of sort of industry groups, that have supported this. Some of those folks are Republicans, and I'm guessing more than 38% of them are Republicans. And we all know from our reporting that people have been talking about the need for infrastructure for several years. So it doesn't seem that, I guess I'm wondering if, everybody's been saying we need infrastructure. Infrastructure week, we've talked about for 5 years or whatever now. But when a pollster says, do you like this package? Republicans say no.
I think it's important to remember, how long were we talking about infrastructure week and getting an infrastructure bill passed under Trump's presidency, right? Republicans have been behind the idea of an infrastructure bill for a while, but now, because it's tied to Biden and Democrats and it's seen as giving them a huge win, oh, well, now, we don't support it. We can't be against it because we've become so, I don't know, tribalized in our politics that if it's anything that gives Biden and Democrats a win, it's bad.
Well, and I think conversely that, this could be politically tough in the Republican. I guess there's a primary, technically, at this point. Yes. Grassley may have to answer questions, but it's easy to defend that vote. All the things that he listed, all of the things that you talk about. But then, Ashley Hinson and Marionette Miller-Meeks voted no. I think that's the tougher explanation. It's like, did you vote no because you knew Trump didn't like it? Did you vote no because you knew the Republican donor base didn't like it? What about your constituents? And soon, this is a long-term bill, but before the election, there's going to be infrastructure projects announced in their districts that are going to receive federal funding. And they're going to face questions about that. So I don't know that that's a big deal, going forward. Campaigns take twists and turns, but I think it's far more complicated and difficult to explain why you voted against this bill that is so obviously beneficial to your district and the state.
Yeah. Well, and it puts those Republicans who, like Ashley Hinson and Marionette Miller-Meeks, in an awkward position when people say, like, well, but Senator Grassley voted for it.
Yeah.
And who's more Republican than Senator Grassley? So, I think it might be hard for them to explain that vote when people look around and say, but, what about those 23% of bridges that are deficient? What about, the project that we want to see finished? So. Yeah, that will be an interesting dialogue on the campaign trail. Also, what might be interesting, Tom, is that Democrats again have called out 2nd District Republican Marionette Miller-Meeks over discrepancies in her financial disclosure reports. She seems to be able to count to 6, her margin of victory last year, but according to the DCCC, has trouble with larger numbers. Without making us wish we had taken accounting, can you explain what this is all about?
Yeah, so Miller-Meeks, an Ottumwa Republican, recently filed an amended financial disclosure report after the Iowa Democratic Party filed an ethics complaint asking for an investigation over her failure to file a complete and accurate financial disclosure report. The Iowa Democratic Party argued the ophthalmologist representing Southeast Iowa's 2nd Congressional District omitted information and failed to disclose relevant information regarding her finances. Miller-Meeks initially filed a 2-page report back in August that listed no assets or liabilities, including assets that she previously disclosed in 2019 as a candidate. That included things like her state pension, a money market fund, retirement account, stocks, and then income from Great River Health Systems, her previous employer, which she all listed in 2019, but didn't list in 2020. And so the Iowa Democratic Party, pointed to Federal Election Commission records that showed Miller-Meeks loaned her 2020 campaign $95,000 in March of 2020 and $100,000 in October of 2020, asking, where did the money come from? According to your disclosure report, you don't have any assets, but the money had to have come from somewhere, right? The only financial information that she listed on that initial 2020 disclosure report was her $100,000 salary as a member of Congress. although she didn't start the job until January of 2021. And then a deferred compensation payout from her previous employer, Great River Health System. So a spokeswoman for Miller-Meeks at the time, back in September, said that she didn't have any outside income, including from IRAs or 401ks, and that she didn't have any outside income that she would be required to report on the form. Lo and behold, with this amended report that she filed recently, she reported receiving a combined nearly $264,000 in salary from Great River Health System. And then she also reported receiving her salary from the state of Iowa for her time serving in the Iowa Senate. The report also found that she had up to $1.36 million in retirement accounts and total assets worth up to about more than $2.6 million between her and her husband. And so, asked why she claims not to have any income that she subsequently reported, her office said that there was, quote, a simple misunderstanding with regards to what was required to be disclosed, end quote, and that once made aware of the issue, the Congresswoman began working with the House Ethics Committee to fix it. Democrats have come out saying that Miller-Meeks lied to Iowans and the press in an attempt to hide millions in assets, and that she may have violated a House ethics rule prohibiting members of Congress from earning outside income above a set threshold, and that had Iowa Democrats not forced her to turn over the information, her assets would have remained hidden.
All right. There's going to be a quiz on that later. I mean, obviously the Democrats want to make an issue of this, but do you think it has legs? To
be honest, I don't think it does. I think what this boils down to is just reporting errors and issues, not maybe failing to understand the reporting requirements and how to fill out the report and what gets reported where and in what section. And, when you say current year, what does that mean? The reporting year is for 2020. So is the current year 2020 and the preceding year 2019, or are we supposed to report, 2021 year to date? Anyway, there's enough arguments here to say that, look, this is just an issue of having to clear up the reporting and it it doesn't look like she's got any assets that are really going to pose a conflict of interest or some sort of ethical violation or substantial rules violation.
All right. Well, if it does, we'll talk about it on a future edition of On Iowa Politics. If you enjoy the podcast, tell a friend and subscribe to us wherever you find your podcast. Send fan mail to podcast@thegazette.com. And you can find us on the homepages of the Quad City Times, Sioux City Journal, Muscatine Journal, Mason City Globe Gazette, Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier, and the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Craig Erickson will take us out. If you know an Iowa band or musician who should be on our show, send us a sound file and subscribe to On Iowa Politics. For Erin, Todd, Tom, and our producer, Stephen, I'm James Lynch. Thanks for listening. Be well.
Stranded in the desert for a while, looking for some kind of sweet relief. I got promises, but sometimes they ain't real. They try to play their trick on me, yeah. Water, I'm getting kind of thirsty down here. I need a little water for my soul. So give me some water for my soul. I've been thinking now about a better kind of situation. Sometimes it takes a little bit of help. Find a new design by divine intervention. Before they ring their midnight bell, well, I need a little water, but getting kind of thirsty down here. So give me some water for my soul. I need a little water, but getting too thirsty down here. Give me some water for my soul. Down here, I need a little water for my soul. Well, give me some water. I'm getting too thirsty down here. I gotta have water before I lose control. I've been lost in the desert for a while, looking for some kind of sweet relief. I got promises, but they ain't real. You know they're always trying to play the little tricks on me. I've been thinking about a better situation. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of help. New design, but divine intervention before they ring that midnight bell. I need water. I'm getting kind of thirsty down here.